crucifixion of Christ, so it's western face of the cross. We've got two little figures on each side on the shoulders of Christ. They represent possibly the earth and the ocean, so Pelus and Gaia. And there is also Longinus on this side, so on my right. On the left there is the Stepaton, putting the vinegar into Christ's mouth, and Longinus is thrusting his heart with the spur. Possibly here we've got Adam and Eve. This is the tree, the trunk of the tree, and Adam and Eve. And possibly here was the sacrifice of Isaac, but it's not visible anymore. And a lot of knobs, interlaces, and here we've got some knots as well, interlaced knots, the cross, but very few biblical representations yet. So this cross, it's from like the middle of the 9th century. So the cross of the scripture is 10th century, the beginning of 10th century, and here we've got the cross from the 9th century. This is a representation which is quite, let's say, enigmatic, because it may show local events, so foundation of Clonmacnoise itself. So there are two figures involved in the process, so the king and San Chiara in the 6th century. So this pole may represent like establishing a monastery, or this is at the beginning of the 10th century when the cross of Clonmacnoise was established, was commissioned by Saint Colman, the abbot of Clonmacnoise, and the king of the southern Uinil. But according to Peter Harbison, it shows an Old Testament scene when Joseph reveals the meaning of a dream of a prisoner. It's a chief butler of the Pharaoh, and he was put into prison. He dreamt about a wine scroll which gives fruit on the third day, on the third night, on the third day. And this dream meant that the butler will be released from the prison and he will be again in favor at the court. And here the butler gives the drinking horn to the Pharaoh. So it means the dream came true. And again, we've got 3 days. So after 3 days, Jesus also resurrected. So this is analogy to what happened with Jesus. And then there we go, the so-called Traditio Clavium, so handing the keys to St. Peter and the New Testament to St. Paul by Jesus in the middle. And here we've got in the head, in the central face, Jesus as the last judge. So we're just talking about that. So Jesus is in the center. He's holding insignia of his power. So the cross staff and the flowering staff, which is the scepter. And he's in the middle. On his right, there are good souls led by this piper. So they are turned to Jesus. They're looking at Jesus, and on the right, on our right, so on the left from Jesus, on his left side, there are bad souls going into hell. And they are pushed by the devil. Mm-hmm. Yes, on the right. Yeah. Jesus is here represented very much like the Pharaoh or the god Osiris in Egypt. That Osiris usually is represented with his arm crossed and with his insignia of power. So he is holding Heka, which was to ward of evil spirits, or it meant also the fertility of the land. And another thing was the crook, like a shepherd crook, which meant the kingship, the reality. And here we've got the cross staff and this flowering staff. And this flowering staff is also represented as a palm tree. And you know, palm tree in our culture is taken back from the church to protect our houses. So it's the same meaning, like in ancient Egypt. But it was transferred to the Christianity as well. And then just up at the top there is Christ in Majestas Domini, so Christ in majesty, with 2 angels at the side, on each side, with their knees like drawn up a little bit, so like in a kneeling position, and just the same representation of angels you also seen in the scene of sacrifice of Isaac. The base is also important here, so we've got 3 riders coming to the left, and there are 2 chariots coming to the right here. And here it's very important also because we've got Christ resurrected with 3 apostles on each side, and he's in the middle. Possibly on the right of him there is St. Peter, but he's not distinguished from others. And here there are 3 scenes. You can just believe me because it was interpreted like that, but it's not seen now anymore. So here it was the representation of Jesus coming to Jerusalem. In the middle there was the resurrection of Christ, and on the right there was an angel welcoming 2 of the holy women coming to the tomb. Okay, so when people just were kneeling in front of the cross, before they saw the Christ on the cross, they saw Christ in the tomb just before the resurrection, and when they looked down, they saw Christ resurrected.